Well, I just asked my neighbor if he'd be kind enough to let me put these two broken bracket pieces into his outside wood-fired boiler and let them cook for a while. I want to try and cook out any oil residue in the porous cast iron in preparation for welding it. But I never did get around to taking this lever assembling rod out of here, so I'll do that right now. It looks like, let's see, there was a set screw here that I had taken out. I had started taking this apart, and why did I stop? I don't remember. But anyways, I could see now that there was a set screw in here that I removed, and now I need to figure out how to get this out. Since it's a keyed, looks like it's a keyed shaft. So I think what I'm going to do is get something in there to act as a spacer. Now, it goes without saying that cleaning up and lubricating this on reassembly is going to really do a lot to help this work more smoothly. Hey everybody, I'm getting ready to head outside, and I'm going to do some grinding on the broken pieces of the cast iron foot for the Hendey Lathe. So actually going to do something regarding the Hendey for a change. I mean, I do want to get the Hendey moving along, but the main reason I want to actually get that welding done is because I want to change over my setup from arc welding on the big old Airco to TIG welding, so I could start figuring out if I'm going to be able to use this thing for TIG welding and also start practicing some TIG welding. So that's the main reason. I've got a couple of, actually I got two things. I got a SIP drill press part I want to weld, and then I've got the lathe foot there that I want to weld. So just a quick note about the video quality. I'm trying the Hero 4 again today. I actually got into a menu there and checked some things. Found out that I was in 720 mode. I've switched that to 1080 mode. I put the frame rate down to 30 frames per second from 60, only because for some reason I think something about the rendering of that if I'm not doing a lot of high-speed movement and stuff, I think the 30 frames per second actually helps out when I'm editing. It helps the computer deal with just rendering rendering all the files and whatever. I don't know. I don't know all this technical mumbo jumbo. Yeah, so of course the audio issue, still using the onboard microphone, but with the skeleton back, going to be a little bit better. Probably what I'll end up doing is when I shoot outside, I'll either switch cameras and go back to my trusty old Nikon, or I will just end up doing voiceover or something like that. Probably not going to get too much outside shooting today. It's windy as heck out there, which shouldn't affect the arc welding, but it's also making it kind of cool. It's January 13th, 2017, and you wouldn't believe it looking outside, but like a week ago, not even a week ago, we got 9 inches of snow, and the past 2 days we had crazy warm temperatures, highs somewhere around 50 or something like that, and we had some rain in there to boot, and virtually all of the snow has completely melted and just made it nothing but a muddy wonderland out there. It's more like spring. Now we're getting back to to normal. The weather's starting to normalize, and the temperatures are starting to go back down again. So that's going to be fun. But I want to try and get this done today, and we'll see. I was gonna, it's not so much the cold out there that was bothering me. It's just that the hoses on the acetylene torch setup are the oxyacetylene setup were like so stiff that I figured they were just gonna crack if I tried moving them. And I want to use that torch to preheat the cast iron piece. I'm not going to take all the precautions that I should be taking with this cast iron weld. I'm hoping that because it's a small part, and because I plan on welding in one section, stopping, and then moving to another section, that should alleviate the problems that you normally have with cast iron. So let me show you that piece for those of you who don't even remember it. All right, so here's the pan leg, as they call it. I believe that's, or pan foot. And basically, for those of you who haven't seen my Hendey Lathe videos, the bed of the lathe sits on here, and then this sits on a big cast iron chip pan that then sits on tall cast iron legs, or tallish, I should say, as opposed to like my Vernon lathe, which just has really tall cast iron legs and the bed sits directly on them and there's no chip pan. So anyways, those of you who watch that series know that in the process of moving the lathe down the bulkhead stairs, I had it slip off of some cribbing and hit the floor, and I cracked this casting. So much to my chagrin. In fact, they're kind of full of dirt right now, but I still have these two little tattoos here in my cellar floor as a permanent reminder of my faux pas. So not unlike many cast iron parts that you may encounter that you need to do welding on, one of the problems with cast iron is because of its porosity, oils tend to want to soak into the cast iron, so to speak, and then what happens is they want to cook their way out as you're trying to weld, which causes real problems. So that's one of the problems with one of several problems with welding cast iron. Well, the reason why this thing looks the way it looks right now is because a couple of years ago when I started thinking about welding this, yeah, it's been that long, I know. A couple of years ago when I started thinking about welding this thing up, I actually ended up bringing this down the street to a neighbor who's got a outdoor wood-fired boiler. And that thing just is running like all the time, especially in the wintertime, and it always has a big old bed of coals in there. So what I did was I asked him a favor. I said, hey, do me a favor. Let me just bury this thing in the hot coals in your boiler there and just leave it there. And we left it in there for weeks. And then finally, I went over there and we dug it out. And so this thing cooked for a long time in that bed of hot coals, and essentially what I'm hoping that had the effect of doing is I'm hoping that was able to cook out and burn off all of that oil that might have been in there from the years of this thing just sitting under the lathe and being constantly bombarded with oil. So I've also got a break here, which that piece, I can't recall whether or not that piece was already missing when I got the lathe. I'd have to look at one of my own videos. It's been that long, because I don't recall whether or not this was already missing or whether or not I've got this piece somewhere and just set it aside and forgot where I put it. But the main thing is we want to get, I mean, quite frankly, at this point, I can even leave that out if I have to. Mainly, we want to get this put together. The reality is, right now, I'm not convinced that I couldn't just leave it the way it is, bolt this into the chip pan, and then when this is bolted up to the bed of the lathe, whether or not that wouldn't suffice. My concern would be, of course, it cracked right here, right through where one of the bolt holes is. So that only gives me this one bolt hole here that's good. I've got half a bolt hole here, and this one right down the middle. So my concern would be that the vibration of the lathe over time might actually cause it to stress crack right here, and then essentially the whole bed of the lathe is just kind of, the only thing keeping it there is the weight, and vibration might cause it to move. The other thing I thought about, and I may still do this, I thought about just making a plate of steel that would fit underneath here and have the bolts, maybe I would need longer bolts, but have the bolts go through the plate up through the bottom and into the bed of the lathe, and essentially it would act to sandwich this broken piece in between there. So that would obviously be plan B if I just can't get this thing to weld properly. And I think I might end up doing that just as an extra bit of insurance even after I weld it up, because that would just give it that much more strength, I think. So on this side here, you can see there's actually still quite a bit of soot and everything inside here, which I could clean that off easy enough in the parts washer, but then my parts washing fluid is going to go right in where I don't want it to be. So I think actually what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use a wire brush and maybe some compressed air outside and just brush it and blow the stuff off of here as much as I can. And then I'm going to use probably a carbide burr and a die grinder and groove this out. And I think the way to do it is probably going to be to groove out the outside, weld it, and then after it's welded on this side, groove out the back side and weld it. And then I also want this to kind of be as tight as possible. So I'm thinking, I'm going to see if I've got a cant twist clamp that's large enough to actually grab here and here and tighten on that. And if that doesn't work, then I could flip this whole thing over, put it on my portable welding table, clamp it down so everything's as tight as possible, and groove out and weld the back side first. And then once that's welded, then come back over and weld here. It's interesting to me that this does not fit together as tight as I would have expected it to, because it should have been a clean break. But I think what happens is because of the coarseness of the cast iron, that some of those little pieces just come off during the break as powder or little particles, and I think that's why you end up with this gap. I don't know, that's just a total guess. What the hell do I know? Alright guys, this is my first time using this table. This is the Nomad portable welding table by Strong Hand Tools. I actually asked for this about 2 or 3 years ago for a Christmas gift and got it, and then never used it. I had the intention of using it on several projects that I just never got to, and so this thing is covered with dust, but it's actually, this is its first maiden voyage. Since I acquired this table, Harbor Freight came out with a knockoff. Somebody came out with a knockoff table of this table. So I don't know how good those are, but these tables, I think they're pretty reasonably priced. So, you know, with Harbor Freight, of course, it's going to be a lot cheaper, but depending on the quality, you know, they're hit or miss with their stuff. So I really can't speak to that. But I do like, I haven't used this table yet, but what I see about the table since I've gotten it, I'm happy about. I mean, it's got a lot of nice features. And this isn't a review of the table, so I'm not going to bog this video down with that. I got a carbide burr in my air-powered die grinder. I've clamped this to the table. I've used one of my, I forgot who made these. This is a cant twist. This is a special cant twist hold down. And what I found was by raising up this lip on the table here and mounting this clamp here and pushing that way, I'm able to push this together, and it's pretty tight. I'm probably going to have to dress that top anyways when I get done. I didn't bother cleaning it up yet because I figure I'm going to make a lot of dust from the cast iron grinding, so I'll just do all the cleaning afterwards, and then we'll try and run a bead and see what happens. And yes, I am wearing eye protection and hearing protection. I might have to hook my bigger air compressor up, run the hose out from the basement bulkhead there, because my outdoor one here is not really keeping up with me. I think I need a more aggressive burr. Alright, let's try this. It's occurring to me that I don't like the way I have this mounted, because I'm trying to... I'd rather have this horizontal, and I'm going to probably want it that way for welding too, so I'm going to try and rethink my whole configuration here. Yeah, I know my pony clamp isn't my first choice for this job, but I've come to the realization I don't have any C clamps or can't twist clamps large enough. A can't twist clamp to fit this would cost a fortune. C clamp, I'll have to keep my eye out for some large ones. Used tool store that I frequent has had a couple laying there for a while that I never bothered picking up because I didn't think I was going to need them. Kind of wish I had now. Been there long enough, I might even be able to get a deal on them. That seems better. This is like 90-year-old cast iron. It's pretty tough stuff. Well, GoPro battery's dying. I guess I'll break for lunch. I only need a little bit more. So I think I'll run a bead on that, and that should hold it together on that side. Flip it over, groove it out on the other side. You know, do this in stages. Alright, so I just took my cup wire wheel and cleaned up a spot on the cast iron over here, and I cleaned up my grounding clamp so that I should have a pretty good connection right there. I'm not going to bother cleaning this area around the weld, because I cleaned out the groove there really well, and I grooved it a little bit deeper when I came back from lunch, and I think that's going to be good. At least I hope so. So what I want to do now is I want to use my torch. I don't have a rosebud tip for my torch, so I'm just going to use a welding tip and just keep the torch moving around a lot to try and get the heat up without you know, melting anything. And so my setup is I've got my torch in there set up and everything over there. I had to move this a little bit closer to the bulkhead entrance to make sure my leads would reach. My ground lead is a little short, so I'm going to move that a little bit closer, but I'm basically going to keep the oxygen acetylene setup as far away from this as possible, and when I get done preheating, I'm going to bring the hose and everything back over there, because I don't want the sparks and everything flying from the welding, from stick welding. I don't want any of that land on any of the hoses or anything. Probably not a good idea. All right, so I've got the Airco. Basically, I've got this set at around 45, which is 45%, because it goes from 0 to 100. It's 45% of what my range switch is set for. So my range switch is set for the 20 to 250 amp position. So at 100, that should be 250 amps. So at 50, that should be 125 amps. So at right around 45 here, I should be around 110 amps, which the rods that I'm using call for 70 to 110. So to avoid any problems with it sticking, hopefully, I'm going to go with the max amperage. And if everything seems like it's going well, then maybe on successive passes or in other areas, I will throttle it back some. So let's see, we can get the Airco on and go from remote to standard. So now my lead is live.